Welcome to Navigating Now, real talk for rocky times. A Pete the Planner Calmcast.
Good day, everyone. It's Peter Dunn, Pete the Planner, CEO of Your Moneyline, and welcome to this week's very first Calmcast. So we have one now. We have one on Thursday, and as a reminder, here's why the show exists. It's 10 minutes out of your day. Whether you're watching it live at 2 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays or Thursdays, or you're catching it in the Pete the Planner podcast feed, this simply is a way to connect with your financial life and cover 3 elements per show. Before we get there, here's who's here today. Participants of Your Moneyline. So Your Moneyline is a financial wellness coaching company, and so we serve about 300,000 people right now through their employers. And so if you're watching and you're one of our participants or you're listening right now and anything we talk about today you want to talk about, hey, that's the glory of Your Moneyline. Just give us a call. Go to your account at yourmoneyline.com and you're set and ready to go. And of course, the general public is, we're letting them in on this as well. So let's get to today's 3 topics on today's Calmcast. It is a nice diversity of topics today. So we've got number 1, inflation. We're going to talk about it through a few different lenses. Number 2, something called sector rotation. Sector rotation. Boy, how excited you must be to have a bald man on the internet explain sector rotation to you. And number 3, we're going to talk about emergency funds, but from a slightly different angle than normal. Let's start with inflation. You know this. You've lived this. You've complained about this, and it's sucked the life out of you for the last 2 years. Inflation. Inflation is when consumer prices go up. Lots of different reasons why. We won't get into that today, but I want to talk about it through a few different lenses, as I mentioned. Number 1, all inflation is not equal in the sense that we may have 4% inflation, which we've got lower than that right now, but we may have 4% inflation in the economy, but that could mean 11% inflation at the grocery store. It could mean 17% inflation at the gas pump. It could mean car buyings at 2% inflation. And so it's this market basket of goods approach where it says, well, what are most consumers exposed to? And that brings you inflation. That being said, depending on what type of consumer you are, your personal inflation rate could be significantly higher. And this is important to know because if you're like me and you listen to any sort of financial news whatsoever, they tell you the inflation rate, they tell you whether it's good or bad, and then you go, okay, well, inflation is not bad right now. So then you go and do the things you do. In fact, inflation sort of come back down a little bit in the last few months. And so you're thinking, okay, well, I'm fine. This is not impacting me at all. But if you're a certain type of consumer, it's incredibly possible that your personal inflation rate is really high. If you eat certain types of foods or you're spending on things like electronics or certain goods or services, those inflation rates might be individually higher. So here's what I recommend. If you're like, wow, you know what? Now that you say that, it does feel tighter than it's supposed to. Go through your checking account statement. I always encourage this. You can learn so much at either your credit card statement or your checking account statement, and simply categorize your spending. If you're a yourmoneyline.com client and you have the essentials package, we do that for you. You connect your bank accounts. It's all going to be categorized for you. And then when you look at those different categories, you have to ask yourself, what's the individual inflation rate on those? It's not hard to find that on the internet. So look at those main categories. Look at that primary inflation rate. If it's significantly above 3%, if it's like 5, 6, 7% in those particular categories, that means if it's one of your bigger categories that your financial life's a little more difficult than you might have thought. Or maybe you sensed it, but now you can validate it with that real data. So that's one way I want you to think about inflation. Another, briefly, as you think about the future, long-term future, not short-term future. So not next year, but maybe next decade, especially if you're trying to save for retirement. We save today's dollars, and we also tend to think in today's dollars when we think about the future. I'm going to make up a number here. Let's say that you think you're going to have $1 million at retirement. Whether that seems like a lot or doesn't seem like enough, don't get caught up in that. $1 million. And so you say to yourself, okay, well, I'm contextualizing that. I'm thinking about $1 million through the lens of what I believe $1 million to be today, April 15th of 2025. Okay, that's how most people think about that. But because inflation persists, usually around 2.8 to 3% is what we want the inflation rate to be. Then that is to say, if in 25 years or so, your buying power is going to get cut in half. So that $1 million will actually feel like $500,000 by the time you actually get there. And you have to account for that in your thinking, right? So it's, again, arguably great to have $1 million. But if I said, hey, you're going to have $500,000 and you think, well, that's not enough. Well, from an inflation perspective, that will be the impact. Now, the market has recovered to some degree since we met last Thursday. There were some wild swings. It's leveled out a little bit. The White House continues to talk about selective tariffs, and there's been some relief over this weekend. Phones were excluded from the tariffs, and a day later, we were told that there will be tariffs on phones later. So again, some of the volatility has been taken out of the market, which brings us to our next term I want to talk about today is sector rotation. Boy, that's exciting. If you aren't already calm because of today's
Calmcast,
then now you're going to be sleepy because I'm going to talk about sector rotation. Here's what it means. It's pretty obvious. In some economies, in some environments, certain sectors of the economy do better than other sectors of the economy. Maybe the travel sector does well as opposed to the grocery and farming sector, as opposed to the financial sector versus the oil and energy sector. What is interesting in times like these is everyone tries to figure out what these tariffs mean for us. Is sectors go up and down, and sometimes they counteract each other, which tells you this is why when you think about investing for the future, whether you're an expert or a novice, you have to diversify. You can't have all your eggs in one basket. I mean, I'll go as far as to call cryptocurrencies its own sector, which is not exactly that way, but we'll call it that. And so that is to say you can't be too heavy in one thing. Let's say you have a significant other that works for a publicly traded company, and within their retirement plans, they're allowed to invest in that company at a discount. And before you know it, most of your money is tied up in that one company, which happens to be in one sector. That's a bad thing because of sector rotation. Sector rotation suggests that sometimes sectors are doing well, sometimes they're doing poorly. And in a dynamic, volatile economy and market like it is today, you have to take that into consideration. I told you that would be boring. Okay, finally, personal finance tip of the day until I see you again on Thursday. I want to talk about an emergency fund. Here's what I've learned is that when times are good, as defined by you, and you have an emergency fund, your emergency fund starts to feel like an opportunity fund. You start to view it as, well, I do have this money here I'm not using, and I haven't had to use it in a while because things are good. And so therefore, I'm going to buy things I normally wouldn't buy with this here emergency fund, which I've conveniently reclassified as an opportunity fund. And then times aren't so good. And then you find yourself bleeding money. You find yourself, there's always something. You can't catch a break. We've said all sorts of phrases like this before. Every single one of us has. And just like that, at the blink of an eye, an opportunity fund, as you think about it, turns back into an emergency fund. And if you took too advantage of that opportunity fund and were way too liberal with your uses of it, you're back to a situation in which you're in an emergency without an emergency fund. We are in difficult financial times right now. I'm not trying to project that onto you. I'm just being honest. That is to say, what is in your emergency fund right now better be used for emergencies and not really opportunities with the threat potentially of a recession coming in the next couple of quarters. So that's what I want you to think about. Don't let your emergency fund turn into an opportunity fund at the wrong time. On Thursday, here's what we're talking about. There's a little tease for you here on today's
Calmcast.
Here is the tease, what we're talking about. We are talking about the indexes. What do they mean? The S&P 500, the Dow, the NASDAQ. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk about consumer confidence and how it shapes the economy. That's fascinating. And I'll even talk about the impact of debt on consumer confidence. And finally, how to build liquidity so you're ready for whatever comes next. Be sure to subscribe to this at YouTube and or the Pete the Planner podcast feed. That's it for today. Thanks so much. This has been the Pete the Planner Navigating Now
Calmcast.